Welcome, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, GM and GN. I am your host, Charlie, and today we'll be talking about the future of liquidity and also the T-Bills campaign, which is a DappRadar ApeSwap collaboration. So first off, I want to kick off with a roundtable of introductions. As I say, I'm Charlie. I'm a writer and researcher and host of DappRadar. Who wants to go next?
Yeah. I'm too British. I'm just waiting for everyone else to go first. I guess I'll kick off. My name is Vandy. I'm head of DAO at DappRadar. So I focus on everything decentralization, governance, bit of gamification and growth there too. And super excited to be on here with you guys.
Ooh. Dragos.
Hi, I'm Dragos. I'm one of the co-founders of DappRadar. I'm working super closely with Nathan as well on the DAO side, but I'm also focusing a lot on the product at DappRadar and many other smaller things that I have to do around DappRadar. But that's the biggest focus.
Thank you, Dragos. And DK.
Yeah, thank you. I'm DK. I'm one of the co-founders of ApeSwap and currently head up our business development sub-DAO. And yeah, just been heavily involved, obviously, in the Radar partnership and everything going on here. So very excited to be on the AMA today.
Yeah, exciting stuff. And thank you all for joining us. We have an amazing panel here, obviously, who are going to be giving us expert insight and opinions on all things Treasury bills, liquidity, and the rest of the DAO ecosystem. So obviously, we're talking about the future of liquidity today. That's the title of the talk. Before we start, I want to look at one of you three, and I want you to give me a definition of what liquidity is. The real basics. Let's set the bar low and just say, what is liquidity? So we're all on the same page. Who wants to take it?
I can scoop that up.
Okay.
I think that the simplest way and the broadest definition, and of course this tweaks slightly, and we'll get into this, I think, during the course of the conversation. But at the highest level, liquidity is the ability to purchase or sell an asset without causing a drastic change in the asset's price. I'm going to say that one more time. It's how easily or quickly you can purchase or sell an asset without causing a drastic change in the asset's price. So if something is illiquid, that means it is very difficult to either buy or sell this asset. And if you do in large quantities, you might very largely change the price. If something is highly liquid, or there's deep liquidity, or it's very liquid, you can easily move in and out of that asset without causing a change in price.
Yeah, so if someone, for instance, buys $1,000 worth of Ethereum, that doesn't change the price of Ethereum too much because it's a hugely liquid asset.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. So
I would like to add something, because DK just explained it in a super simple way. And there's a common question that we sometimes we get in our Telegram groups or in our Discord server. Some users are coming and as the Radar token exists on the Ethereum blockchain, but also on BNB Chain, where you can find all our liquidity is on ApeSwap. Some users are complaining why is there's such a huge fee to do a swap on BNB Chain, and it's a much lower fee to swap that on Ethereum. But that's not a fee, and this is exactly what DK just explained. There's not a lot of liquidity for the Radar token on ApeSwap. That's exactly why we're here. That's exactly why we are launching the Treasury bills, and we have the liquidity mining program as well up and running. This is exactly the reason. We're trying to have more liquidity so anybody can just swap without losing a big amount of the amount that they're trying to exchange. So that's not a fee that anybody's taking. ApeSwap doesn't get that fee. DappRadar doesn't get the fee. It's just a big change in the price because there's not a lot of liquidity in the pool. But that's exactly we're trying to run these programs to offer a much better rate for everybody as long as they want to exchange a Radar to other tokens.
So we want to boost liquidity there to allow people to easily move in and out of our ecosystem without incurring huge unexpected charges, basically. And yeah, so everyone get involved. It's good for everyone. Sorry, okay, we're going to jump in there.
Yeah. When I think about liquidity, I think about it on a spectrum. So you've got on one side very high liquidity, and this is characterized by a lot of that asset available to access, and it has very low price buffer whenever you make a purchase. And then low liquidity is when there's not a lot of that asset available, and if you purchase that asset, then it will cause a big price. And usually whenever you're looking at a pool with different assets on it, they're somewhere along that spectrum. And by increasing the amount of asset available, then you'll go further down the spectrum, and shrinking the amount of asset available, you go onto the other side.
Cool. Right. So we all know now what liquidity is, which leads us nicely on to talking about the Treasury Bills campaign that we're running as a partnership. First off, DK, I'm going to put this one to you. Why are we doing it? Why are we running this Treasury Bills campaign?
Yeah, great starting point. And I think we can build exactly off of what Nathan is saying and what Dragos just touched on. The purpose is to gain deeper liquidity for the Radar token. Plain and simply, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to increase the liquidity, specifically on BNB Chain, so that there's basically a better trading environment for the Radar token. Now, the other piece here that I think is also really worth calling out is that through this process, we are also building the protocol-owned liquidity that the Radar DAO actually owns. And that is something that is really changing and flipping the script on how we think about how DAOs build liquidity. Because typically, a DAO sources liquidity from the community via some sort of renting program. We're seeing this currently with the sushi program on Ethereum. Basically, community or other random LP providers, just random yield farmers out in DeFi, are providing liquidity and gaining Radar rewards. But at the end of that program, you either need to top up with more Radar rewards to continue to rent that liquidity, or you stop the program and the liquidity will ultimately start to dry up, right? Because there's no incentivization to keep the liquidity there anymore. Well, with Treasury Bills, we are basically flipping the script, and rather than just giving away Radar's precious treasury tokens for free for short-term liquidity, we are actually turning those into an investment where Radar is seeing, I think the T-bills that the first round of T-bills, we saw above 90% return. So rather than spending those tokens on renting and getting $0 in return and a short-term solution, we're putting those tokens into a long-term solution and actually getting a return on the tokens via Treasury Bills. So I think that's the other really big component here. And again, that liquidity is then owned by the DAO.
Yeah, and something I want to pick up on this. Something you said at the start of that answer was something about owning liquidity. Can you just go a bit more into that? Why, in this specific sense, but also in a broader sense, why owning liquidity is important for a platform or a DAO?
Great question, because at the end of the day, as we're talking, right, there's a lot of things that stem from having your token be liquid. First and foremost, some of the things that we just touched on immediately in this call: better trading environment, right? People can move in and out of your token with more ease. There's less friction. There's less of a barrier to entry, especially if we think about new users coming into the ecosystem. If you have low liquidity, you're basically just putting up a huge wall in front of yourself to onboard new users, right? If you don't have a smooth onboarding experience into the token, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So first and foremost, right, that's wildly valuable, is you want a smooth onboarding experience. We want to, right, we're doing all these marketing efforts, we're doing all this building. If I can't, if we're tripping over the last step with not being able to get those users into the ecosystem, we're just kind of cannibalizing our own efforts, right? So that's hugely, hugely important. Other really important components include deeper liquidity provides better price support. Again, if we touch on what the purpose of liquidity, right? It's to be able to move in and out of an asset with less price impact. So deeper liquidity gives you better price support. you're able to facilitate higher volume with more liquidity. That one, should hopefully just kind of be come naturally. More liquidity, it's easier to promote trading. And then one of the last things that I think is really important to touch on is liquidity really is the backbone of a DAO's balance sheet, right? Most DAOs, ApeSwap included, we own 90% plus of our treasury in our native token. So if that native token is illiquid, i.e., you can't use it because you can't trade it into an asset that is either more spendable or it's difficult to do that. DAO's balance sheets are now worthless. So without liquidity, your token can't actually do anything, right? It needs to be liquid for that token to have value. So I think that's another huge component here is truly the capitalization of the DAO depends on deep liquidity.
Yeah, that's a really interesting last point I just saw heard you make, and then I think I saw Nathan and Dragos both nodding the moment you made it. So do one of you two want to jump in there and say maybe how that impacts on the DappRadar DAO, or how you see what DK just said playing out?
Yeah,
I
definitely.
mean,
So
please, Nathan, go. I want to add something else about cross-chain, so you can take this one.
Yeah, you go, Nathan.
Oh, awesome. Then, yeah, just piggybacking off what DK said about ownership of liquidity, it gives a lot more confidence to both the investors and the DAO members themselves, the more liquidity that is owned by the DAO. Because the DAO is less likely to sell this liquidity when any market changes happen, because the more of that liquidity that we sell, the more price impact that it has, and the worse it is for our investors and our community in general. As DK also said, the more balanced that the price of the token is, the better for us as well in the long term. There's going to be more price appreciation because there's more confidence in our price, and we'll be able to use that for our operations. And when it comes to using it for the operations, so scaling up the DAO, owning the liquidity also means that we can gain rewards for holding that liquidity from people trading assets. As when you hold liquidity and it's on a decentralized exchange, whenever people trade in and out of the liquidity pool that you own, all of the liquidity providers will gain rewards. So circling back to what DK said beforehand, as this turned into an investment, the DAO already becomes a revenue generating organization by holding its own liquidity, which is amazing for the long-term health of the DAO.
Yeah, all about sustainability as well, I think. Dragos, did you want to jump in there as well?
Yeah, I think also I wanted to add 2 points. One of them is, and I'm not sure, maybe DK can correct me if I'm saying anything wrong here. But I think also by owning the liquidity, yes, there are a lot of benefits for the DAO. But at the same time, we're also trying to reduce the exposure of the community and the liquidity providers, because then they are not exposed to impermanent loss as long as they don't have to provide as much liquidity, as we are the ones. The DAO is the one providing most of that liquidity in the pool. So I think it's like, yes, there are a lot of benefits for the DAO, but there are also benefits for whoever is part of our community, part of the ecosystem, and whoever, instead of just having a lot of users providing liquidity and being exposed to the impermanent loss, then they simply don't have to do it because there's enough liquidity owned by the DAO. And the second point that I wanted to mention is DappRadar is our thesis was that the blockchain space is multi-chain since the start. We were tracking Ethereum. We've started by tracking Ethereum. We've then started to track other popular blockchains when we launched, and we kept doing so. And now we're tracking, I don't even know, probably of over 55, 60 blockchains. We've always been we've always thought like the multi-chain is the future, and we can see that right now that's exactly what's happening. And over the past years, everybody built towards multi-chain. Everybody Like we see bridges being super popular and so on. So I think also the fact that we can own the liquidity as a DAO, that can also help us to be much more efficient when we want to be present on different chains and we want to expand our ecosystem. We want that all the users on DappRadar are able to have access to the features that we're building, to the services that we're offering. And if they have to get hold of the radar tokens, then they can do it on multiple chains. So they don't have to maybe pay the high fees on Ethereum, or they don't have to, I don't know, be afraid that this blockchain is maybe super centralized or whatever. Everybody has their preferences. We want to be able to offer everybody a chance to be part of what we're building. And that means we want to be on multiple chains as a DAO, and the token should be present on multiple chains. And I think owning the liquidity is just going to help us to achieve this. And we'll see, like the title of the AMA is the future of liquidity. I think can be a huge discussion just how liquidity can be used across different chains, and we could just talk about that for an hour. But I think, yeah, like just owning the liquidity as a DAO, I think it's super important also because we can just be more efficient when going to different chains.
Nice. So what I'm hearing there is this program, this campaign of T-bills is going to lead to sustainability and stability for our DAO and our company and our users ultimately, so that we can keep providing the information that people need to make sense of the whole of Web3, which is ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to give tools that people can use to see how a very complicated ecosystem works. On that note, and this is kind of bringing it back to basics, but how will the T-bills campaign work? DK, how will it work on a very basic level, and how can people get involved maybe?
Yeah, great question. And everything Nathan and Dragos went over were spot on, in my opinion. All very good and accurate points on exactly how we're thinking about all of this. But yeah, so to try to give the highest level summary here on how T-bills works, it's pretty simple. Basically, as a user, you can go in and ApeSwap has a lot of abstraction to make this as smooth as possible. So if you come with LPs, maybe from other dexes, if you come with just single straight BNB, or maybe you have some radar and some BNB, you really can come into this product from any point of view because we have Zap enabled on the entire thing. So basically, if you want to get involved, just hook up your wallet. The UI will help kind of point, if you already have LPs, it can use those. If you need to zap into something, we've abstracted that whole process. So just jump in and land on the ApeSwap Treasury Bills homepage and go find the DappRadar Jungle Bill. You'll be able to go hit buy, and essentially, depending on what you want to swap into the single asset radar, basically just go through the process. And at the end of the day, all that's happening is ultimately anybody purchasing a Treasury Bill is going to sell their radar BNB liquidity pool tokens, aka give the liquidity to the DAO for them to hold, and you will receive back more single asset radar than what you actually put in. And that discrepancy, or how much extra radar you get, is based on the discount. So if we go to the T-bills page right now, we can see that the discount is about 0.47%. So I'm going to round that up to 0.5%. So that would mean for every dollar of liquidity that I give to the Radar DAO, I'm going to get roughly about $1.04, 4 or 5 cents back, rough math there. Because again, you're getting about a 0.5% discount. Now, over time, this discount will fluctuate depending on how many people are purchasing the bill. So that will change over time. But yeah, at a high level, basically come in. You can use any type of asset to jump into the Treasury Bill. ApeSwap takes care of obfuscating that for you, so you don't need with the Zap feature. And then yeah, you can put forth the asset. You give the DAO the liquidity, and then you get more of the single asset to actually hold. And then the last piece there is the radar that you do purchase is vested over 30 days. And that's a linear vest.
Does anyone add anything onto that they think would it be extra helpful in terms of information or anything?
Yeah, I think it's always nice to think about it in relation to how liquidity used to work with rented liquidity on platforms, Uniswap, and where, as DK said, you would get a liquidity pool token by providing two assets. For example, it might be USDC and Ethereum. Then you'd get the USDC Ethereum liquidity pool token. And in the old version of liquidity provision, you would take that liquidity and you would stake it in a farming pool and then receive the rewards of that pool. But as Dragos mentioned earlier, you're vulnerable to impermanent loss if there are very big changes in the price, which actually puts your investment at a higher risk. So by using Treasury Bill's campaign, and you actually, instead of staking that LP token, you selling it for rewards over time, you remove that risk, that impermanent loss risk, and you get the same or even more rewards on top, depending on the discount. So as an investor, you're having a lower risk to your investment choice.
So it sounds like a safer way to sort of get involved in this part of DeFi, really.
Exactly. Sustainability, as you said.
Yeah. Dragos, did you want to add anything onto that, or do you want to?
No, I don't think there's anything else. Yeah, just make sure you're connected to BNB Chain with your wallet, so you can see the Radar Treasury Bill.
Yeah.
I was connected to Polygon earlier, so I couldn't see it. I'm just sharing from my own experience.
Yeah. So I think the link is actually in the chat there now. So go and follow that and go to ApeSwap and see how you can get involved right now. DK, you mentioned something about a 30-day vesting period. What does that mean for people who don't know?
Yeah, great question. So vesting, basically it's called a linear vest, is the kind of the simplest way to, or what it's most commonly referred to. But basically that means, let's say I purchase, $1,000 worth of Radar via this Treasury bill. I'm going to get that $1,000 vested evenly over a 30-day period. Or a better way to look, or easier example, let's say I purchased $30 worth of Radar. I would get $1 of Radar every single day. Again, each $1 associating to 1 day of the vesting period. Yeah. So basically, yeah, it's called linear vesting. If anybody's participated in any type of like public sale or anything, it's a similar mechanic there. And yeah, that's essentially the short gist of it.
Cool. Cheers. Thank you. Now we spoke.
Yeah, it's kind of like streaming, like when you stream an asset over time, like it just slowly drips to you. Just as
opposed to getting it all at once. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now we spoke very, very briefly, Nathan. You said about how this is a safer way of doing it. It's maybe the future of liquidity mining. And I wanted to sort of just take a step back from this specific campaign and talk about the developments in liquidity mining. Perhaps we could even touch on the recent crisis at FTX and the lack of transparency there, and how this sort of decentralized finance model is safer, better for people, and you're less likely to get burnt because you can check stuff on chain. So yeah, I want to open the floor up and talk about developments in liquidity mining, and feel free to touch on FTX if you dare.
That's a hot one right now. It's in more ways than one. And yeah, I guess one of the really amazing things of FTX situation, obviously my empathy goes out to all the people negatively affected, is that over the past couple of days, you've seen price of tokens in Safe and Trust Wallet like absolutely skyrocket. And these two tokens are tokens of decentralized wallets that focus on self-custody. And that's one of the biggest differences from centralized exchanges and decentralized exchanges, because of the classic maxim, not your wallet, not your coins, right? When it's on a decentralized exchange, it's your wallet, it's your coin, and you can see where your asset is. So there's that level of transparency, which when you're dealing with centralized exchanges, it's very hard to get that transparency over where your assets are being held, because that exchange can decide to use a combination of hot wallets and cold wallets. They don't always explain where the assets are, sometimes for competitive reasons, and then obviously sometimes for nefarious reasons as well, as we've seen too. Obviously, this decreases the counterparty risk if you know where your assets are. It doesn't mean that there's no risk, there's still technical risks, but even here with decentralized exchanges, because the technical infrastructure is transparent and can be seen by anyone, it means that it's battle tested as well. And then on top of that, you can see whenever an asset has made a bad act. I could carry on with the different benefits that come from having a decentralized compared to a centralized exchange, but let me catch my breath and let someone else jump in.
DK, do you want to jump in? I know you've got some thoughts on how decentralized.
Yeah. No, definitely, and yeah, echo every word Nathan just went through. It's all of that was completely spot on. But yeah, I mean, it's so fascinating, right? Because we're sitting here and we're talking about, right, why liquidity is important, and you know, it's tough to not comment on, right, what's actually going on in the industry right now. And right at the end of the day, FTX had a liquidity crisis, right? That they had a liquidity crunch. That's exactly what happens when you see a quote unquote run on the bank. And right, run on the bank just means there's too many people trying to withdraw assets from a specific centralized area, and that centralized area does not have the assets that they were given to actually give back to the people. Yeah. And that's what we saw here, right? That's why this whole thing melted down. And the crux of this is because they operate in a black box environment. Exactly like what Nathan was talking about. You don't know what's going on underneath the hood inside of a centralized exchange. DeFi literally was spawned to combat that, right? We see this corruption and this malicious intent all the time in centralized institutions. We have a history of consistent malpractice by these centralized entities. The whole point of DeFi is to remove that middleman, because we cannot trust middlemen. We've been fooled and taken advantage of time and time again by these middle centralized institutions. So what's a better model? Well, let's completely remove the malicious human in those centralized entities and replace them with code that we know 100% with absolute certainty how it's going to interact and react every single time. If you go look at DeFi, every single major DeFi protocol is upheld flawlessly through all of this, right? Compound, like any of those assets that were sitting in DeFi protocols, like those DeFi protocols stayed largely solvent unless they were using FTT in some sort of collateral, right? That then there's obviously a broken fundamental mechanic inside of there. But any of these other ones that were doing proper risk management on chain were all completely unaffected. We didn't have an issue in DeFi. This is a centralized problem. And that's exactly why we're here, right? Because when you go and interact and trade on ApeSwap, you hold your funds 100% of the time. ApeSwap never touches them. It's literally impossible for us to touch them. All that happens is you're interacting through a front end with the blockchain itself. We basically just make it easier to interact with the blockchain. And that's where the true value proposition of this is, and where, you know, as an industry, we need to put more focus on self-custody and, you know, owning your assets, own your keys. That's why we're here. Take that ownership on yourself, because you can't trust other people to take care of that ownership for you. And I think FTX is a perfect recent example of why we can't trust the centralized systems, because they take advantage of us. And at the end of the day, right, it's the users who are suffering from this. It's the people who had their money on FTX that can now not get that money back. And if you keep that and you self-custody those assets, well, you never have to worry about that problem in the first place. You completely avoid it. And there's tons, you can go trade in DeFi, you can go access a lot of the traditional finance pieces that you want to access in a decentralized environment, and we're only bridging that gap further. It's only going to become easier to onboard. It's only going to become easier to trade on DEX. It's only going to become easier to self-custody. Vitalik has been encouraging better self-custody solutions for a while now. I think this just puts a better emphasis on that as an industry. Obviously, we have a little work to do to make this easier for people, but the story and narrative should only be wildly more in front of our face at this point with what just happened, and why we need to self-custody and why we need to take the ownership upon ourselves.
Yeah.
Just a little point there. Yeah, you're absolutely right. UX is going to be the major thing that turns this industry around. We've been suffering with bad UX for a long time, and we do need to get. You were mentioning Malik was pushing forward, and he even mentioned this at Ethereum Amsterdam earlier this year, where he talks about maybe looking into putting social recovery of keys on the base layer. It's not easy to do at all, but these are the types of solutions we really need to be looking at if we want to make sure that when we do have people coming into DeFi, they aren't taking on too high of a risk, because that will act as a barrier to entry to them coming into our industry.
Dragos, did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with what Nathan said. Like, also, that was one of the biggest topics at DEF CON, like a few weeks back, a while ago. A lot of wallets, like MetaMask was on stage. They were talking about that. They were talking about social recovery. They're looking at ways on how they can introduce that for their wallet. They are taking a lot of responsibility for a lot of the UX problems. They are calling it the original sin, as a lot of the wallets that have been built after MetaMask was created followed their practices just because everybody was accustomed to the kind of journeys in a wallet, but that doesn't mean they did a good job. So they are taking this responsibility, and they're trying to make changes, and they're trying to improve that. So totally agree. I think UX and wallets UX, websites, front ends UX, I think that's going to improve a lot over the next years. One thing that I also wanted to add from a data perspective, we are DappRadar. I've seen a lot of centralized exchanges showing off their proof of reserves. I think that's a very good initiative, but it's just a bit like that doesn't really solve the problem of transparency. That doesn't really tell if there's a problem or not. Yes, you can see that they own a certain amount of funds in their cold wallets, but we don't know like how much was deposited initially. We don't know the liabilities that they have. So yes, it's a good start. It's nice to look at how much are they holding in the cold wallets, but that's still a long way to go until we have. I'm not sure if we will ever have the same transparency as we have in the decentralized exchanges, but at least some level of transparency. Because right now, yes, proof of reserves, that's a very nice step, but still, like that doesn't solve the problem. So yeah.
And the other thing is that if those proof of reserves are there, they, as you say, they may have transferred in X number of Bitcoin or X number of USDC in the last 2 days, said, look, here's a screenshot, here's our reserves, but then, you know, they could just send them out again 2 days later because when they promised to. So yeah, I know there's been big talks in the last 2 weeks about this now being the inflection point for decentralization to take its mantle back. That there was the whole idea in 2009 when Bitcoin started. It was all about not having middlemen, everything being trustless, but obviously in a good way, where there's no case of someone doing the right thing. It's hard coded in. Morals are hard coded into the system. So hopefully that's what happens next time. But I completely agree with you, Nathan, about the UX thing. It's a conversation I was having earlier. Like, some platforms need to have easier usability for people. For instance, Curve. I mean, if you take that as an example, it's very difficult to use. So how can we make those systems so easy to use for people where it's almost as easy as, you know, going onto Apple or going onto using Google's products? But yeah, that's around the corner, Nathan.
You picked the worst example.
Yeah. There's just someone said it earlier. I was doing a Twitter Spaces, and someone was like, they spoke about Curve not being very user friendly, and I was like, I don't think I can use Curve, so I don't know how people who aren't part of the world can use it.
Curve looks like Windows 95.
They've actually updated their UI, so now it looks a bit better.
Like Windows 98. Speaking of governance and transparency and safety, I wanted to know what DappRadar's governance process is around the T-bills campaign. Nathan, I think you're probably the best person to speak to about this, but just, yeah, the ideas that led to the campaign and then DappRadar's governance processes.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of the ideas that led to the campaign stemmed from a lot of the benefits that we're talking about right now. We're us trying to make sure that the token is stable as possible so that we can sustainably use the token for the operations of the DAO, to scale it up, especially as we start moving towards actually getting contributions from the community. We're going to have our gamification come in soon. We're going to start allowing people to integrate from the community and the contributions. So with that in mind, the goal was to find a partner that would help us get more for our buck when it came to liquidity, because we were using SushiSwap beforehand, and it was quite expensive. As DK would say, we were renting the liquidity rather than earning any revenues by owning it. And so the process of governance to actually get to this point is that we started, as the core team, we started speaking to ApeSwap. We reached out to them and we had this conversation about how we can integrate their DEX into our just liquidity strategy long term. And they actually gave us a whole analysis. The guys at ApeSwap are great. They explained how we could optimize our liquidity strategy right now, figures included, and we were able to actually do that. We were able to see how we could reduce our APR on the Sushi swap liquidity pools while still maintaining depth in liquidity. So we already developed a good relationship with them. They helped us with the first Treasury Bill, and we were able to develop a lot of revenue from that. And obviously we have that now. We're earning more revenues from it. So after that first initial partnership, we said, okay, look, we're getting closer to moving towards the DAO structure. For the next campaign, let's explain how well it's gone to the community so that they understand our thought process and the direction that we're going in. Let's explain the benefits, the features, the community's input was. And so we slowly went from being off-chain and speaking just between the team and ApeSwap for us community forums with our proposal DCP, Treasury Bill campaign. We listed all of the numbers there, and we had some feedback about what the difference was. Even as part of this governance process, we also shared some education about the difference between rented liquidity and proceeds. And we to vote after we had this education and engagement campaign with the community, and yeah, the community agreed, and we had an on-chain vote, went through Snapshot after it went through the DAO forums, and after that, it's up to the core team to execute on the community and the DAO's decision. So yeah, that's the process. Initiate the idea, discuss it in the forums, with an on-chain vote, and then execute.
Yeah, so the beauty of that whole governance process is that it is fully transparent, fully decentralized. There's no one that can go and rig the game, really. So this is all about the community having its say and taking our product, which is DappRadar, forward. So it's all doing it sort of together with the users. Dragos, did you want to add anything onto that?
Maybe just the fact that we are slowly going through a decentralization process. So yes, as Nathan explained, that's the current process for the governance process. Yes, as it was explained in the forum multiple times, yeah, we have to go out with a forum proposal, then that goes to snapshot if that gets voted in the forum and discussed, and then that gets executed. But we're trying to do much more of that. We're trying to bring much more information to our DAO. We're now working a lot behind the scenes. I would love that we could share like much more to the community. I think we're doing so many things, and they're like, we have a lot of plans that we're going to execute one by one to make sure we get into a much better position so we can involve the community even more. Right now, we were mostly putting up for vote decisions that were impacting our treasury. So when we had to use tokens from the treasury or from the airdrop tokens that were left from the initial airdrop, but we want to do much more than that. We want to build a proper work stream structure where we will have multiple teams and so on. I don't want to spoil more right now. I'm just kind of sharing a bit because we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes, and I'm super sad that like we cannot really share that with all the community already. But I'm confident that in the next few months, the whole governance process, the whole DAO structure is going to be much more clear for everybody out there. And like we'll try to share as much information and knowledge as possible that is happening internally at DappRadar. So then everybody has the right knowledge and the right understanding of what we're building, where we are going, so they can participate much more and they can help us to go into the direction we have all agreed. And obviously the community will help us shape that direction. So yeah, I'm super excited about the whole governance process. And I know like right now there's not a lot of activity, even if over the past months we actually had a lot of proposals, but I think it's just going to get much better, and the community will have more chances to shape the direction and to be involved in the processes.
Yeah, so there you go. You've heard it here first, guys. The future is decentralization, and we are putting our money where our mouth is, and we're moving fully towards that. Soon everything will be open and on-chain, and you'll be able to see exactly what we're doing and do it with us, and have a say in what we're doing as a community. I've just seen this comment in the comment section. DK, this is one for you. Who's in charge of ApeSwap's treasurer? Or I assume treasury is what they mean.
No, great question. And I mean, I have some thoughts on riffing off some of the DAO stuff as well, but to directly answer that, ApeSwap, the treasury is behind a Gnosis safe multi-sig. You can go to our docs. It's fully disclosed where that sits. We have an entire dashboard that shows and tracks and basically, again, tries to make it easier for everybody to just go see where the treasury is at rather than, tell you a bunch of smart contracts that you need to go dig and look at. We've taken that next step to put a UI in front of it and pull the data up to a level that's easily digestible for the community. And we're only trying to continue down that path to, again, just make it easier for people to see what's actually going on underneath on chain. But again, all the smart contracts are fully disclosed in the docs. There's we have 2 levels of multi-sig inside of the Gnosis safe. There's lower level kind of, security smart contracts need a 2 of 5 signature, and higher level stuff needs a 3 of 5 multi-sig. And the individuals that hold those right now are all core contributors. I did have one, but we recently shuffled the keys around just again to continue to decentralize. So the holders right now are Apetastic, who's one of the co-founders and head of smart contract security, Ape Guru, who's also a co-founder and heads up our basically admin kind of sub DAO. Obidobo, who's also a co-founder, is the head of the product sub DAO. Diddy, who sits on the marketing sub DAO, and Julian, who sits on the biz dev sub DAO. So those are the 5 current holders. And again, you'd need either 2 of 5 or 3 of 5. You specifically need 3 of 5 to do anything with the treasury, and all treasury movement has to be approved by the DAO via governance. You can go see we're actually our proposal 23 and 24 are live right now, and you can go see the entire history of how we've managed the treasury and what authority we've been granted by the community to use any of that treasury in any specific location. So yeah, there's a deep paper trail and history of the treasury.
Perfect.
And how it's evolved. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go, made after death. There's your answer. Right now, DK, I did jump in there and I cut you off. You were going to say something about DAOs, so I'll let you get back onto that now.
Oh yeah, I think and it's, you know, Dragos and Nathan, you know, very clearly share this excitement with me. I am so excited for the next few years of the development of how DAOs actually operate. Like, we are at the very forefront of this concept of basically, like, right, the internet's blown up. How do we take people all over the world and start to build communities that are not centralized around a geographical location? Because that's truly what's happening here, right? We've realized, like, you know, there's so much more connection that's actually going on, where traditionally, and if anybody knows who Balaji S is, I'm riffing a little bit off of some of his concepts here. So I want to give fair credit to where a lot of this is coming from. Definitely, if you haven't checked out Balaji S, go check out his nation state concepts. They're really fascinating. And I think, at least I resonate with a lot of that personally. But the point is, we have new communities that are cropping up that are that are, you know, focused around online relationships. A DAO is simply that, right? It's a group of individuals with a common interest that want to be able to trust each other without necessarily needing to trust each other. And that's where the code comes in, right? When we build robust governance mechanics, we continue to remove that barrier or necessity for trust and replace it with code on chain. That's where we're trending with this. That's the whole value proposition here. And the thing that I think we all need to keep in mind, and the point of where I'm truly trying to come to on this, decentralization is a process. It is going to take us some time to figure this out as an industry. We're going to try things. They're not going to work. We're going to learn from that, and we're going to continue to decentralize. And at least whenever I talk about decentralization, specifically at ApeSwap, again, I always look at it as a spectrum. And at ApeSwap, our goal is always to be trending more towards decentralization. We always want to get, you know, more transparent. Everything that we're, as I noted, you know, we have that treasury dashboard. We have new things that we're going to add to that. We want to continue on this road of transparency, but it's not going to happen overnight. And we're going to learn a lot as an industry as we go through this. And as we work together, you know, as one DAO and another DAO, and we start to, you know, get involved in these governance processes, like, you know, there was a huge step forward with co-authoring a governance proposal between two DAOs on the DappRadar governance platform. I haven't seen many of those out in the industry right now. There's not a lot of that happening. Like, we are literally on the forefront of DAO building here inside of these two DAOs, and we're only going to continue to trend in that direction. Again, it's not going to be a perfect path, but as long as that trend always is towards decentralization, we're chipping away and continuing to make progress. And that's where we need to go as an industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the idea that the DAO is the new democratic way of organizing sort of commercial enterprises is it's really, really exciting. And I know there's a lot of people who have a view that the DAO is as revolutionary as the corporation or the limited liability company was, you know, 150 years ago.
Could not agree more.
So
could not agree more.
Yeah, and as you say, we're not going to get it perfect every time, because we're making something new, but we'll learn from the lessons and we'll make something that is going to be fairer for everyone. That you can, and it's organizing people across huge areas. I think that's the main thing. Is how do you do that? And you use the internet and you use code to make things fair and to make things everyone have a say. But that does lead me on to a question I've had like sort of in my mind for the last couple of minutes, which was, how do two DAOs cooperate? You've got one decentralized blob over here, and you've got another decentralized blob over here. In my mind, it's like two galaxies colliding. But can someone explain to me how two DAOs work with each other to, you know, as a partnership and make something happen together in agreement?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the main things to understand before you even take on that question is understand the autonomy of DAOs. And DAOs are a balance between governance and operations. So the governance of the DAOs is the processes and policies or the rules of how the DAO needs to operate. So how was a proposal made, where did the discussions happen, how is how is the structured, and then the operations is the day-to-day execution of the decisions made by the governance of the DAO. And one of the main differences between the two of them is that the governance is done mainly by the entire community, largely, and then the operations is done by a core team, which is elected by the DAO, through the DAO governance to execute the day-to-day operations. So that's the first thing to understand, because it's not, DAOs can be quite big. You can have like thousands of people holding and voting on decisions, but it's not thousands of people actually operating on a day-to-day basis. That would be absolute mess and chaos. So that's a first distinction to understand first. And within that operation, every DAO has a different structure. So for DAOs that immediately are decentralized, they sometimes don't have a company structure at all. They don't have a legal entity at all. But when you've got a company such as DappRadar, which started off as a centralized entity, we have to take into consideration that we have a legal entity and work with that legal entity when we're decentralizing. And in fact, some DAOs are now, on top of that, having legal entities that represent the operational structure of the DAO too. So within what we're doing at DappRadar is we utilize our legal entity to have partnerships with DAOs, and based on whether the DAO has a legal entity or not, we can either do mainly on-chain transactions for those that don't, or we can obviously utilize more on-chain aspects of the DAO's legal wrapper or entity too. So that's how DAO operations and governance works. But it's quite interesting because ApeSwap is very, very decentralized. So it's mainly on an on-chain transaction that things happen.
Yeah. Does anyone want to jump in there? Add any more onto that?
Yeah, I mean, also I could add it like in that I don't think that applies only DAO to DAO partnerships, but I think DappRadar could just, I don't know what are the parameters on the ApeSwap DAO to how many tokens do you need to create a proposal and so on, but considering you can meet all those requirements, we could just jump into the ApeSwap forum, create a proposal for the partnership that we'd like to set up. If the community and the team agrees, we can just move on with that. So that's the beauty of this. You don't need to, let's say, official channels. Like that's the official channel. Like you don't need to show up in a suit. Like, hey, let's make a partnership. So we can just use the forum. The community can vote if that's beneficial for both sides, and you can move forward. So that's like a more simple approach. But it can also be done as a, let's say, B2B approach.
So it's actually the DAOs both vote on the partnership and then the operational teams make it happen. DK, did you want to add anything to that?
Man, I would echo everything said so far, and I think it's just super fascinating to start to see, and I mean, again, ApeSwaps that obviously Radar, both parties are only going to continue trying to push down this path of decentralization, but the ability to basically you can kind of start to fast forward and really, again, this is what gets me so excited. You can kind of start to see a future state of where we're trending, of every major decisions being fully discussed on an actual forum, and then those being actually backed and supported by on-chain transactions and voting, and then the execution of whatever was decided on is also on-chain. So again, just a level of transparency that we get afforded to by blockchain that allows us to interact as a large global community, just a global nature and force, and to be able to have that level of trust, because you don't need to trust who you're talking to. You just need to look on chain and make sure that the on-chain data actually matches as to what is either being advertised or voted on, or, you know, if tokens are being moved, right? Like, as long as you can see on chain that the community voted on something and then the, you know, what was actually executed matches, like, you can have trust in that system. And then it just becomes a matter of, again, continuing to push for further decentralization, continuing to always show everything on chain, following through on, you know, what's voted on and actually executing on that. It just, you know, becomes a game of doing that. And yeah, I'm just super excited for the decentralized nature to continue to grow, and just to be able to see, you know, again, hit that kind of future state where, yeah, truly the DAOs are just interacting with each other by getting on each other's governance forums. And again, I think the co-authored proposal here is just such a cool first step as we continue to decentralize and turn this into a reality.
Cool. So I guess on that exciting note, I'm going to wrap it up there, unless anyone wants to add anything else they think has been missing or they'd like to say about DAOs or liquidity or the future of decentralization.
I'd just like to finish by saying it's been wonderful working with the ApeSwap team. Super bullish just listening to DK. So I know these next months and years are going to be some great collaborations ahead. I'm looking forward to diving more into your ApeSwap DAO forums as well. So let your people know we're on our way.
Love it, love it, love it, love it.
I would also say the link to the ApeSwap site there for the Treasury bills is in the comments there. So go and check it out, and go and check out the ApeSwap site and see what they have to say about it. Dragos, any last words from you?
I'm also excited about what DK said earlier about DAOs. I think, like, one last word about the technology. I think decentralized identities and zero knowledge are going to just support all the things that DK said, are just going to make things better. Obviously, there's still some time to get those things live and up and running, but I think, yeah, that's just going to make what DK said like a reality. And yeah, I would like to thank everybody and DK for being here, and you guys for kind of having a nice discussion together.
Cool. DK, I'll give you the last word.
I appreciate that. I would just like to make a call out to anybody here listening. Challenge yourself to be more decentralized. You know, if you have tokens on a centralized exchange, educate yourself. Take that power back so that you aren't just at the whim of these centralized institutions. If you're a part of a community, go get involved. This ultimately has to be fueled by the communities, by every single individual. Right? That's where the power comes, is all of us making this individual choice to try to be a part of something larger and build something greater that ultimately brings that power back to the individual. So we don't get basically screwed over by these centralized entities that don't have our best interests in mind. It's, yeah, I'm not gonna tangent too far there, but I highly encourage people, go look at how decentralized the project is that you consistently use. And on top of that, go look at their liquidity. If they have poor liquidity, start asking yourself, hey, why are we not talking to someone who can help us further decentralize and who can help us build the liquidity that we need to gear up for, the decentralized path that's only growing and becoming more prominent. So yeah, if you're working with a project or anything, feel free to reach out to anybody at ApeSwap. We would love to work with your project to do similar things with what we're doing with DappRadar for that. And again, push for decentralization. Get your tokens on chain. Take that control back. Get involved with governance. Be an active player in the space. We need more activity and more people joining this charge with us. That's how we're going to grow together, is by doing these types of activities. So yeah, just couldn't be more excited for the future. And yeah, appreciate the last words, sirs, and appreciate everyone having me on here. It was absolute pleasure to get this time with everybody today. Thank you.
There we go. Power to the people. Go and check out the T-Bill campaign. It's all about sustainability, security, stable predictability, I guess, and maybe just a small smidgen of transparency as well. So everyone, go and check it out. And thank you all for being here, and thank you guys for joining me.